All right, everybody. So we're here with our next interview. This is interview 11. And so who am I here with?
We're with Bryan Ellis, man.
Bryan Ellis. All right, Bryan. So you're a father, right?
Yes, sir.
And how many kids you got, man?
Got one kid.
You got one kid,
son.
boy, girl, you got a son.
Yes,
Oh, man, a good boy. You got to try to raise them boys up the way you want them, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Bryan, when it comes to fatherhood, right? What's a key lesson that you're learning right now? And even an example you want to tie you're learning right now as a father with you raising your son. What's one of those things you're learning right now?
Oh yeah, what I'm learning right now is I'm working on my weakest virtue, which was patience. I'm learning patience right now,
Okay.
like, through application and everything right now. Because I'm an adult. I'm 31 years of age right now, and my son is at this point he's 5 years old.
Okay.
What I'm learning is patience and trying to, instill what I as a man and I as a man of God need to instill and convey, and that he needs to learn.
Right. You want to be that example?
Yeah. And just kind of speaking personally on me.
Right.
I'm somebody I didn't have much patience in terms of how results driven I wanted to be or strive to be.
Yeah.
And learning is a process, and everyone doesn't learn at the same pace or in the same way or in the same time span. So that's what I'm learning of. Okay, what I'm trying to instill to him and convey to him needs to be kind of nurtured to a certain point, and that's kind of
the patience piece that you're talking about.
I'm learning that aspect of trying to instill lessons in a nurturing manner. I love that. Patience is it's all encompassing. So
that's huge because I would say even when we're talking about patience, it's like while you're teaching him patience, he's probably learning how to have patience with dad, and that's probably what we want to have too, right? I mean, I know he's 5 now, but it's one of those things where they see everything we do. They see every single thing. I know my son, now I'm watching him and he's emulating stuff that I'm like, wait, what are you doing? You're doing the same things that I used to do. So I get you what you mean by patience because we're continually learning. Like you said, learning is a process.
Yeah, it's so interesting that how as fatherhood is helping you get a deeper understanding of things you may have come across in your earlier years.
Absolutely.
It's giving you a deeper understanding. And one of those things is a saying. I don't know. It sounds like it comes from a famous person, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It says, "In learning, you will teach, but also in teaching, you will learn." So fatherhood is really giving you that understanding of in teaching, you are learning as well.
Wow.
So
that's
really where like that lesson within that little phrase of lesson within itself is coming full circle.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this: has there been a time where you felt like me as a father, that dynamic with your spouse, like how I need to lead, my son, as opposed to maybe how my wife might want to, provide direction to my son? Like, is there a time where you've had to okay, this is what I want to teach my son as a father, which might be not as opposed, but maybe in conjunction with a little bit different raising your boy? Is there a time, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so has there been a time where it's like, okay, and give me an example if you want to share, man, what was that example like? Like, okay, might be what my wife wants to do, but this is what I want to make sure my son has to know for himself. Even if you guys are doing it in conjunction, but you get what I'm saying? As men and women, we're different, right? So there's some things that we want to make sure that our children know, specifically our sons, right? So I'm just trying to get anything like that you.
I got you. I got a good one for you.
Okay.
I think I do. I do. So I definitely get the question. Good question, by the way.
Yeah.
I think, one aspect I have on that is the trying to hold your child accountable part. For every action there's a reaction. For every action there's a consequence as well.
Absolutely.
So that's one area where it's sometimes we seem like we may be juxtaposed, me and my wife, of how we want to implement those repercussions to certain things. Right. So
balancing that.
Yeah. So that was one of the big ones because it's like let's just say I give you an example. I think all dads and parents can kind of go to.
Of course.
You give a child you give your son, or in my case a son, an action of, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z a certain way,
right?
Or there's going to be
some
consequences behind it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I got an example.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of a good one, but I think I got one off the top of my head here. So, kid wants to do, my son wants to do, like, he likes to play games and stuff like that and make a mess of his room all the time.
As all kids do. Yes, absolutely.
So the thing was, like, okay, you can do what you want in your room as far as like playing and all this stuff, but when we say it's getting ready for bedtime, the bedtime routine, you gotta clean your room up, pick up things a certain way. But sometimes he doesn't want to kind of adhere to the latter part of that. Real putting things back where they need to be.
Absolutely.
The consequence is more times than not is we have a dialogue.
Absolutely.
A stern dialogue. It's a stern dialogue.
Absolutely.
Then the consequence more times than not, you don't have your screen time to end the night.
Right.
Mom kind of came on the other side of that. It's more so of I guess she's like more so the administrator of the night, of getting ready for night routine.
I know what you got. I know exactly where you're going.
She has the mindset of, if he doesn't have that screen time to look forward to, he kind of goes about that routine, I guess, in not the most jovial manner.
Not the most jovial manner. That makes sense to me. Because it's like where do you find the line of setting the standard versus allowing a little bit of, let's say, leeway or freedom on certain things depending on where you're at. So that makes perfect sense to me, man, because I want fathers out there, and I want families out there to know that this fatherhood thing is not easy.
It's a process.
And it's not easy just because of, not just simply because you're raising kids in a world where it is, but it's also in most households you have someone who you're balancing that parenting ideas and ideologies and things like that with the other person. So you're trying to come together to make your child the best that they can be. So that's really what I wanted to get at, because I kind of asked that question just about that balance and dynamic with mother and father.
Right, definitely. And like I said, it's a process on both sides. Like even on my end, I have to be more mindful of like I said, when I've had that stern talking, I have to be mindful that the dialogue we have is not, it has to be more of a, not uplifting, but it needs to be more of a nurturing tone, and not just a harsh,
come down.
You know what I'm saying? Like a harsh rendering of your consequence, more so.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
So like I said, it's a process. So I had to kind of play on words. I had to kind of mirror both of our processes we want to do between my wife and me.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Be mindful of be empathetic to the emotions of your child. Right. But at the end of the day, being the man and the provisioner and the provider and the leader of the house. You have to be kind of rigid in the ushering out the consequence. The consequence is still the consequence. Absolutely. But you don't have to be harsh or cruel or dogmatic in rendering that the accountability piece.
No, that's a great point, man. That's a great point. So let me ask you: is there a saying or a just something that you really want to get across, and you want to make sure that your son knows, with all that's said and done as he's growing up, before he turns 18, what's that thing you want him to know? What's that thing, if you got to boil it down to one, what's that one thing you want him to know as you're raising him?
My goal, like I say, it's to my son. So, and my goal as your father is for you to be a better man than I am.
Wow.
But listen, at the same time, I know that's gonna be a challenge within itself, because I'm a heck of a guy. I'm a heck of a guy. Yeah.
So I love that, man, because it's you were talking about your son making sure that you're giving him more than maybe who you are as a man. You're giving him more. You're trying to build him up more in that.
Right, most definitely, and it kind of goes back to that saying I mentioned earlier. In learning you will teach, and in teaching you will learn.
Right.
And like I said, and that kind of goes back to me, is in this fatherhood role, I'm teaching a lot, but I also have to learn a lot.
Okay.
So that kind of holds me accountable.
Right.
I need to be my best self.
Gotcha.
And I find me to be my best self as I edify my spirit, my God, and my faith as a man of God.
That's huge.
So as I continually better myself through God,
right,
I'm in a position so that he's going to be his best self in the manner he's going to become.
I love that, man. I love it. That's key, man. I think a lot of us fathers need to take that advice, because sometimes we don't learn until, like you said, until we're teaching, and then even after the fact, sometimes we have to come back and kind of figure that thing out. Next question for you: is there a time where you maybe not? Because I know he's 5, right? But is there a time within yourself where you're like, man, I might need to fix that with my son? Because we were talking about, I'm speaking in it from a standpoint of apologies, right? But I know, have you found yourself like, man, I kind of got that wrong with my son. I might need to correct that a little bit, or maybe say to him, Dad, sorry, or something like that. Have you ever had to do that?
I never apologize to my son.
I just got done telling you I was a great dad. What are you talking about?
But no, of course, yeah. I kind of like, using it. It comes up more times than not in hindsight. In the hindsight of, when I reflect on, did I carry out my fatherly duty in the best manner I possibly could? Yeah. And sometimes it even comes from my, from my better half. My better half, she says, little man, Jair, my son, he's upset at this present moment right now. And, sometimes that's where I feel like, okay, maybe I need to course correct, right, or kind of, assure him of your dad loves you.
Right.
Dad still loves you. Even though I told you you can't play the you can't play the switch, or go to your room because you're being too loud and you kind of being insubordinate to your mom, right. Post dinner time or something like that.
Absolutely.
But
Dad still loves you.
Yeah, that's where I find it more times than not.
Okay.
It's maybe not a dad is sorry, but dad is mindful in maybe sorry and trying to hold himself accountable. Okay, right. I didn't carry out my fatherly duty to the best I could as far as meshing that balance of, like I mentioned earlier, rigid consequences, but also being nurturing. And this is someone that is learning. This is a young person that's learning. So,
and just letting him know that you're still his right. dad, you still love him, but you're still working on it.
Definitely.
Man, I love that. Last question for you, man. If there was one thing you wanted to leave with your son, God forbid something happens to you, and you want to make sure that he knew this about Dad, or knew what you wanted to leave him, what would that one thing be? And one thing you want to leave your son out of all thoughts and processes that might come.
That's a good question too. I guess one thing I would definitely want to leave is having my son have an understanding that his father was a striver for what was a striver.
Was a striver.
Yeah.
Wow.
I come from humble beginnings. That's a whole nother story we can get into, right? I don't know if we got enough film for all that.
Right.
But I had, like most people, we had our our origin story, our beginnings, and kind of how I was able to matriculate to where I am. Okay. And a lot of that God had to have a heavy hand in that. The just kind of the distance travel up to the point where I became a father. Okay. I hopefully I would want him to be aware of that. Yeah. And contextualize that, knowing that that effort it took to strive and the resolve that had to come with that too.
That's amazing.
So I hope those are kind of some of the morals and principles I would leave. If anything, I could leave that with my son.
Dad striving. I love that, man. That's a phenomenal, man. Listen, I appreciate the time, man. Appreciate that. Man. Listen, y'all, this is interview 11. Stay tuned for more interviews. All right. Peace.
Yes, sir.